Welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. You all are in for such a treat today. If you've been following for a while, you know I love building fairy houses and walking in the woods. I'm a great believer in getting messy, making mistakes, and connecting science and STEM in the natural world to what we do in the classroom. And when this book came across my desk, I knew I had to have this author on the show. We are going to be talking about forest magic for kids. And the author, Susie Spikol, comes to us from 30 years of experience in education. She's a naturalist. She is a fellow lover of fairies, and she's going to soon be my new neighbor in New Hampshire. So, Susie, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, Diane. I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk with you about STEM, about nature, about learning, about children. And I'm really excited that you're going to be my new neighbor. I can hardly wait.
Okay, so Susie, I'm going to ask you to read the entire title to us because it's so lyrical and it's much more magical than just forest magic for kids.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd love to read it. It's so exciting. Forest Magic for Kids: How to Find Fairies, Make a Secret Fort, and Cook Up an Elfin Picnic.
So, what inspired this journey back into childhood? Because this is just this gorgeous blend of introduction to science without being sciency, and then giving people ways to engage respectfully in the woods, no matter what their comfort level is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and part of it is that I do teach, and I've been teaching for 30 years as a naturalist, bringing people and children outside, connecting to the natural world. And something I really began to notice was kids in particular are a lot more interested in sort of the stories of nature. And I thought began to think, it made me reflect on what got me interested in nature. And what I realized was my interest in nature came early to me, but it wasn't through science. It was through the stories I was reading. And I really wanted to, sorry about that.
That's
Can you
okay.
hear me? I really wanted to write a book about the magic of nature, the stories. If you hang on a second, I'll just get my puppy to get quiet.
It's okay. We like puppies. That's part of the natural world. Your puppy can make as much noise as the puppy wants.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I really just wanted to write a book that really celebrated and gave families and teachers and caregivers ideas of how to make that connection between nature and story. And that's where I think the real magic happens for kids. So that's what inspired me.
Well, and I know you talked about in the introduction sort of some of the stories from your childhood that inspired that. And um, I remember thinking when you mentioned Anne of Green Gables, I was like, yeah, 100%. The whole Lake of Shining Waters, and the idea that we name things and give things names because we need something more poetic than just whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just really love children's literature. I still do. I read whatever's new. I just read Wild Robot. I love
Oh, that's such
Paxton.
a great book.
Oh my goodness, I love them. But I figured out pretty early I was a big reader, and my mom was a great storyteller. And we spent a lot of time reading. She would read out loud to me, tell me stories. And soon I realized like the best adventures happen outside. Like if you think back, Winnie the Pooh, it's all outside. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they go through this closet in this house, but it opens up into a whole nother world. And the first scene is like a snow scene. The Hobbit, I mean, I've read The Hobbit probably 6 or 7 times. And when I was about 7 years old, my parents gave me the book. This is a big book. It's a book of gnomes. It's just called Gnomes. Oh my goodness, that changed my life. I spent the rest of my life, I'm still looking for gnomes.
Me
So I
too.
I just love that part of it, the magical part of nature and how nature is it's unlimited. It's sort of where our imagination is is most capable of making up stories.
Absolutely. And I know like with my own little girls, when they were younger, we used to do fairy houses, and they would build fairy houses out of anything. It was one way to get them out into the woods, and they would start building using rocks and bark and whatever they found and make these little houses. And then they would write notes, and they would leave notes for the fairies, and the fairies would write notes back. And the fairies had these little teeny tiny pieces of paper that they would send the notes in. And I still have some of those from years ago, but I can't walk past a tree without looking for like fairy condos and apartments, because we would talk about where the woodpeckers had drilled holes. Those were like the apartment buildings. And you have stuff in Forest Magic for Kids that opens up this world to other kids.
Yeah, I loved hearing what you just shared. And I think your girls are so lucky to have had that experience. How old are they? Are
They're now
they?
22 and 25, and they will tell you that they were fortunate in that. I know that many kids today don't have the privilege of a free range childhood. And during their formative years, we were living on a prep school campus. My husband was director of facilities. And so they put us in the house that had the biggest issues. It was like the 150-year-old farmhouse where the water would come in and out of the basement every spring. But we had this 500-acre backyard of the property that went to the school. And so the girls would literally go out with a walkie talkie. And as long as they communicated back with me, they could play on these 500 acres. And so they splashed in creeks, and they raised chickens and goats, and they took walks, and they had their Laura and Mary cabin. It was an old milking shed that became their Laura Ingalls Wilder cabin, and it was their hideout. And so they got this magical childhood that we want all kids to be able to have
Yeah.
pieces of. And I think that's what I found is I'm looking at Forest Magic for Kids, realizing, yes, my kids had an exceptional opportunity, but we can still help kids find that magic today.
Yes, it's true. I mean, I wanted to write a book too that just let gave parents permission to say, I don't know what the name of the birds are that are singing outside, and I don't know the names of the trees in my neighborhood, and I don't know what bug this is, and that's all okay. It doesn't just because you know the name of something doesn't mean that you really know it. Then that just being outside with your children and kind of going on these magical adventures is another way of being outside and knowing the natural world. And in some ways, I think it's even more powerful because it's child driven, letting your children kind of be the leaders. That's the part that goes into the child's heart. They're not, you know, so what if you know that it's a birch tree? What does that really mean? But if they build a little fairy house in the woodpecker hole that's in the birch tree, then that tree has this deeper meaning to it. So I'm a really big advocate of that. And when I'm teaching, I'm always trying not to name things, which is hard as a naturalist because that's what I was trained in. I, know this, I know that, I know this, but I turn that off. And I really encourage all families to turn it off and just go out and really play in deep imaginative play outside.
And that fits really well with what I do when I'm working with teachers and kids as well, because I always try to start with wonder and finding the wonder and then letting that spark the curiosity. Because once you've had that playful hands on experience, then you can fill in the names and you can discover what makes a birch tree, or delve deeper into how do the trees communicate with each other. But it starts with that spark of wonder.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. I mean, everything you just said really resonated with me. And the whole idea of childhood really being about wonder and play and experiences, hands-on, full sensory experiences. That's really the work of childhood. And I think we've, as a society, drifted a little bit far afield from that. And I'm hoping with books like mine, podcasts like yours, programs around the country that I'm beginning to see. I hope we can make it back to really thinking about what is wonder for children. And as a parents, when you see your child get that, then you get wonder too. It's reciprocal.
And it builds into, I know people always go, well, what's the payoff, because we want to see that result. How is this going to reinforce the standards, or you know what, it's just play. And the idea behind it, I think, is if we know that we want to create an ecosystem of people who are innovators and creative thinkers and problem solvers and able to collaborate, it really starts with this playful wonder and giving them opportunities to engage with each other and with nature, to
Yeah.
learn that give and take, how to negotiate, how to play, how to build, how to fail.
Exactly. How to take a risk, how to judge whether you can walk on the rickety bridge over the little creek without falling in. Are you comfortable doing it? Can you climb a rock? Can you climb up a tree? Like those are really important things because that gives a child a sense of self like awareness and self empowerment and letting our children, sometimes you fall off the little bridge into the little creek, but it's important. Those are the learning spots. That's where the learning takes place. And yeah, I mean, I have noticed that when I'm teaching and I give kids a chance to be playful and kind of find the whimsy, they are much more able to focus on the learning after. Do you know what I mean? Having that
Absolutely.
moment to
You've
finish.
activated that curiosity and
Yeah,
now they're ready to fill in the knowledge.
right. And we have our whole lives, like as grown-ups, we forget, like childhood doesn't last that long. And we have our whole lives to learn, what the names of the trees are if you want to, or what birds are singing, or all of that, or how the world works. But we don't have that much time in our life to just purely be imaginative and playful and silly. And I think those are really important skills.
We need those qualities and we need the empathy that those lead. And if you haven't learned the names of birds, when you turn 50, you're going to
Yeah,
get that choice of, do you want to know the birds? Do you want to know the trees? Do you want to know the squirrels in your neighborhood? Because somehow that seems to hit us when we hit that milestone.
that is the truth. That is so funny. Yes, yeah, that opportunity to just kind of imagine and explore and kind of manipulate things in nature. And nature's just full of all those loose parts that are
Yes.
free to us. Like you don't have to buy toys. There's the rocks and there's the sticks and there's the leaves and there's the flowers and there's the grass and it's that kind of freedom of loose part play that I think really spurs that curiosity, innovation, problem solving, kind of triggers the imagination, all of that.
So if loose parts play is something that our listeners haven't heard before, can you define that for them?
Sure. Yeah. I think how I would define loose part play is when we have things that are in our world naturally that are unfixed in some ways. So, rocks, sticks, leaves, branches, flowers, things that they can manipulate and create their own. So if you think of a common schoolyard with play structures, those structures are really affixed and they're not a lot of things that kids can do that change the play structure. But if you gave them like a log, some boards, some rocks, they can create like all of a sudden maybe the log and the board are a seesaw, but then maybe later on they're the gangplank of a pirate ship. It's sort of undefined in some ways and movable, and that movability of it creates that innovation, that opportunity for imaginative play.
Perfect. So, what I'm wondering is, can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on Forest Magic for Kids in terms of how you divided it up? What are some of the different chapters, and maybe share one of your favorite examples with our audience?
Oh my goodness. Well, it
And
was
I know I'm
really,
asking you to pick a
I know
favorite, like picking a favorite child, but
it's hard. I think the way that I thought about dividing it up was how maybe a naturalist would think about it. There's a section on plants, kind of the green team. And that's like crown making, having a special tree, those types of things, flower fairies, that type of stuff. And there's all activities in there of how to make a crown or how to make a secret fort, or things like that. There's a chapter on mushrooms, because what is more mysterious than mushrooms? And what is also a little bit thrilling about mushrooms is, every kid kind of knows, ooh, they're a little bit dangerous because they're poisonous. And so I just want to be clear, there's nothing about eating mushrooms in my Forest Magic book, and I don't encourage wild mushroom eating unless you're with a real mushroom expert, an adult who knows what they're doing. But the idea of looking at what is a mushroom and why do they appear all of a sudden and what are they doing there? And then all of the amazing stories that go with mushrooms, like the idea that mushrooms are born from lightning. That's one theory. That was like one story people told, because they would notice that mushrooms would come up after rainstorms. And then, of course, there's a whole section on secret forts and map making and that kind of thing. And there's mammals and animals. There's a section on animals. And I'm really into having kids make small worlds. And so there's a lot of small world play through it. And there's a whole end chapter on how to make small little beings that fit in those small worlds, gnomes or fairies, or something that I call peeps, which are little people or little mice, little animals. And I have to say that if I had to pick, it's really hard to pick. Like, I love the potion making section in my book, and that's just mixing up, you know, pine needles and mud and water and flower petals and sort of casting your mind on what these are, and pretending, maybe you made a potion that gives you the opportunity to speak to unicorns. But if I really had to pick my favorite thing, it is small world play. And that's building small gnome homes or fairy homes or little villages. I think that small world play is essential in childhood, because when else is a child bigger than something else? And to kind of be the boss of it, and they give them an opportunity to kind of work out ideas and kind of have conversations and make their own world in how they see it and populate it with their own kind of people. So small world play would be my favorite from
And
gnomes and fairy homes.
I love that. So you're a naturalist. Can you explain to us what it is to be a naturalist and share a little bit about your adventures in learning on how you became who you are today?
Oh my goodness. People are always asking, what does a naturalist do? And a naturalist, I've come to think of it as I am sort of a storyteller about the natural world. So my specialty is mammals. And my first book that I wrote was The Animal Adventurer's Guide, How to Prowl for an Owl, Make Snail Slime, and Catch a Frog Barehanded. And that is really how I find myself most interested in nature, is what are the animals up to? And I find that's true with kids too. They're really interested in what the animals are doing. And I became a naturalist, well, through story and playing outside, and my love of animals. I was one of those kids that just loved animals from the very beginning of my life and still do, and can't get enough of them. Like, I fall in love with a different animal probably every season. Right now, I'm really into muskrats. I saw one and I was like, oh, muskrat, what don't I know about muskrats? And so I'm still so curious about the natural world and always looking and learning. And nature is just full of so many mysteries that lead me forward. So I spend most of my day as a naturalist teaching people of all ages, from the very youngest. We have a babies in backpacks program at where I work, which is the Harris Center for Conservation Education in a little southwestern part of New Hampshire, and then all the way up through a lifespan to people in assisted living. Like, really, every age that we are, there is something in the natural world that can inspire us, that can motivate us, that can excite us, that can give us opportunity to develop that compassion and empathy for our natural world. And that's my ultimate goal, really, Diane, is I really want people to love the world that we're in. We just have one world, and this is it. And learning how to care for it and growing children who have that in their heart, that's really what's going to help our future.
Agreed. And I think that often we find we've disconnected from the natural world. And when we disconnect, it's much easier to numb ourselves and lose sight of how we're really interconnected to everything and that we're rooted to this world. And so it sounds like what you're doing is helping people take steps back into their own being.
Yes, definitely when I'm working with adults, that's often what's happening. And I'll have people say to me, "Oh, I feel like I'm a kid again. This makes me feel like a kid." Or I remember doing this when I was a kid. And I think it's sad that, we get to be adults and we forget what brought us joy as children. And often what might have brought us joy as children is really simple. Maybe it was seeing a firefly. Maybe it was climbing to the top of a tree. Maybe it was, throwing back your head and eating a snowflake or tasting the rain off a flower. And I just say, we are never, ever too old to have those experiences.
I agree wholeheartedly. Before we got on this call, we were talking a little bit about our backgrounds, and I was sharing with you that I used to work at a children's museum, and it was the best job in the world until it wasn't. And that had nothing to do with the children's museum and everything to do with me and the fact that I had forgotten how to play. And it took a worldwide pandemic to help me get back to that. But it was sort of through the pandemic that what else are you going to do? I walked around, I took walks, I reconnected to catching fireflies and staying among the trees and watching the muskrat that populates our local pond and following the pattern of the goslings. And so it's really simple stuff, but it's the stuff of joy, and you don't have to go on a huge expedition to the Arctic or the Antarctic to find it. It literally can be in your backyard, and even if you live in a city, you have opportunities to re-engage with it.
Yes, I mean, here I am, a naturalist, and most people maybe listening would assume, oh, Susie must have grown up someplace really wild, like in the middle of nowhere, Maine. But no, I actually grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I fell in love with the wild things that I found in the sidewalk cracks, like the fact that you could find a dandelion in the middle of all this concrete.
Yes.
That was so thrilling. And oh, Diane, I had a secret fort in my neighborhood, and it was between these two garages that were so close. I called it the sliver because you could only fit in sideways, like it was a sliver. And I spent so much time in there and watched ants and worms and snails. And I still really miss that kind of, I don't know, finding nature. I live in a very rural place now, but when you live in a city and you spot something natural, it is so thrilling because it's easy to forget when you live in a big city that nature is absolutely everywhere. It is in the biggest cities and it is in the most remote places. It is the sky and the earth below us, and it is resilient, and it is there for us if we just take the time to notice it.
And that involves stopping, observing, and just letting yourself wander a little bit.
Yes, yes, you really do speak my language. Yes, I like to go out roving and meandering and not follow a trail. My son and I like to go kind of off. We go bushwhacking off the trail, and that's where kind of the most exciting things happen when you step outside of where you think you're going.
Absolutely. The trail that's near us, I spotted a fox twice this winter, and I know where its den is now. Like I was able to sort of track it by smell and caught a couple of quick glimpses. So I know where it lives now, but I wouldn't have done that before. And it involved just stopping and observing and being willing to take a little bit of an adventure off the trail.
I love how you shared that you rediscovered kind of play during the pandemic. And I think that a lot of people did. A lot of people got into bird watching, and a lot of people got into going outside and hiking or being outside because there wasn't much else to do. And I just hope that many families are carrying that forward, because just because we're kind of back to our normal world doesn't mean that we have to forget the joys that we discovered when life slowed us down. We were all slowing down. So something my son and I did during the pandemic was we cooked our meals, our one meal a day, our lunch meal outside over our campfire. And we were just reminiscing about that. He's like, Mom, he's 14. So he was like, Mom, I miss when you make grilled cheese over the campfire. So we're going to do that this summer. We're back to making some lunches over the campfire.
Oh, that's so much fun.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it's a reminder that we don't need a global crisis to
Right.
slow down. We just need to be able to take that breath and give ourselves the opportunity to resist the pull of the world. And all the crises that are out there are still going to be there.
That's right.
And nurturing joy and connection to the natural world is so huge.
It is so huge, and it really is connected to developing the skills of like being a scientist or being an observer or being a person who can problem solve. I mean, all of those skills that you could think of being really important as an adult can happen outside. The outside world, it's unpredictable, and that unpredictableness is part of where we learn the most. You go out for a hike and it rains. Okay, you get wet. So now that was part of your experience. That's just life. So it's a really good life lessons.
Absolutely. So I know Forest Magic for Kids is out right now, and I strongly recommend getting it for your summer adventures. But you have another book coming out this fall. Tell us about
Yes.
this book because it sort of
Um,
connects very nicely to this one.
yes. It is sort of a companion to this book, and I'm so excited about it. It's called Book of Fairies, and it is really a book I started when I was 8 years old. I had a little notebook and I made up fairies, and the fairies explained things that I saw in nature, like how come the sunset was so beautiful. And what was that? And I didn't have an answer or a reason, so I thought it must be fairies who painted the sky. So this book of fairies is coming out in September, and it's a really great companion with Forest Magic. It's sort of like you go out and do some of the activities in Forest Magic, and then you could come in and read some of the stories of the different fairies throughout the book, and it would be a great continuum of the idea that the natural world is unlimited imaginative space for us.
I love that. So, as an educator, if you could wave your magic wand, what would you do to change the way that we approach nature and the idea of forest magic in the classroom?
Yeah, I just think that we need to have more time outside with our students, and that teachers, pre-service teachers, teachers that are learning to be educators, this should be required course in their college education, to learn how to be outside with a group of students. It is so good for us as humans to be outside. And all of the scientific evidence points to that. It lowers our cortisol levels, it increases our oxygen levels, it exposes us to vitamin D, which is an essential and important vitamin to have in our bodies. Studies show that it increases your focus after you've spent 20 minutes outside, that our senses are firing, all of them, and those senses are creating synapses in our brain. And so if we can have our children outside in ways that feel safe for us as educators and safe for our children who might not have that much experience being outside, we can grow together to be really good learners outside. And that learning can be anything. You can learn math outside. You can take a book outside and read it. I just did an author's residency at a school that had a forest classroom, and they had hammocks, and their kids did their silent reading in the hammocks in this little
Amazing.
school. And I just thought that was so brilliant. Um, so, not all of us maybe have schoolyards that have a forest that can do this, but um, even where I grew up in Brooklyn, New York at PS 197, if my teachers had brought us outside more often, I think I would have paid better attention in my school. So that would be my magic wish, is that we really are teaching our educators to think of nature as a fabulous resource for learning outside. And that resource grows in children the compassion and empathy to be good stewards of our earth.
I love that. All right, last question for today. What brings you hope?
Brings me hope is really working with kids. I think our world is really hard right now. There's so many environmental crises and it's so hard. But when I spend time with kids, they're still just loving this planet that we're on and having big dreams about the future for it. And that fills me up with hope. And it puts a fire in my belly to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to leave a good planet for the future children and their children's children.
I love that. Well, Susie, thank you for joining us on the Adventures in Learning podcast. I'm going to drop your webpage and your contact information as well as links to your books in the show notes. And I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much, Anne. This was so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in New Hampshire.
Me too.